I'm Jamie Kratz-Gullickson, and my husband Jason and I built Donor One. I'm a little bit of a maker, but I'm more of an artist, and Jason does more of the electronic bits.
Right, so I'm Jason Gullickson, and I handled most of the electronics and things in this project. And then I worked actually with a few other people who aren't here today, which would be my father, Jim Gullickson, and my brother, Justin Gullickson, who handled a lot of the heavier fabrication and some of the woodworking and that kind of thing.
So the original idea for Donor One actually just kind of showed up in some social media feed that I was on, and they were full-size arcade machines that were, you know, old Pac-Man and Galaga and Frogger full-size machines, and they had been retrofitted by the American Red Cross for charity. And so the bottom part from here down had been removed and filled with plexiglass, and then you could play these, and they were put in airports so that when you had a layover or something like that, you could just pop some quarters in and raise money, and people that were coming through could see how much money had gone into the machines. And I have a background in nonprofits, and so I was really excited about this idea. You know, I'm kind of a child of the 80s, so I thought, what a really fun way to raise money, but I have no woodworking skills. I had no bundle of cash to give for an old machine, because we tried pricing those and they were pretty expensive. And so of course I started talking to Jason about it and asked him how we could do something like this.
Yeah, so I'd known a few people who had built arcade cabinets. You know, it's a pretty common thing around the kind of techno, where those of us that grew up in the 80s and do computer and electronic stuff to build something like this. So I just sort of assumed that someone had already done, you know, this charity arcade machine thing. But looking around, we couldn't really find anything that had been done. So we thought, well, okay, let's see what would it would take to design it. And so
well, they had done it, but you could buy the machines, but it was like, you know, $5,000 to buy one. So
yeah,
from Sweden.
Well, Sweden, right? So yeah, it was totally
freight
practical.
shipping across the ocean, you know.
Right. Well, they're big and heavy, and so I talked to some friends that had built similar machines and learned about, you know, what kind of an electronics package and things would work. But no one had really designed one. Most of them weren't designed to accept any kind of money, because they're just for, you know, down here, you know, den or whatever. And then the ones that were more like traditional arcade machines, so they were sealed and they weren't, you know, there was no intention of communicating what kind of money had been collected. So we sat down and started drawing pictures. And one of the things that was, you know, kind of obvious looking at the machines from Sweden was that they were big, really big and really heavy. And so we wanted to design something that would be at least theoretically be portable, but still had the spirit of a full-size machine, you know. So we looked at some old designs, and I just kind of sketched up something that was a hybrid between the style of some of the original arcade machines, but modified to have a transparent piece where you could see the money that was put into it. And then also designed around the idea of it being like, you know, can we make it something that can get cut out of, like, say, 2 sheets of plywood, you know, so, and light enough that, you know, 2 people could carry it.
And measured it so that it would fit in our 13-year-old Honda Element, and then the transmission blew on our 13-year-old Honda Element. So then it turned into kind of a not as portable machine, which we'll talk about a little more, because that sort of inspired this big guy's baby sister, Donor 2, who's getting work done in our garage right now. So.
Right, yeah.
Sorry, continue.
No, it is funny. It was perfectly designed to fit exactly into that vehicle, and then the vehicle went away. Which is a good, you know, lesson in, like, kind of the variables, right? When you're designing something, you know, the cool thing about building it as opposed to buying it was we could make it exactly what we needed, but the duration of time under which it takes to build something, sometimes things change.
Well, and in true Kratz-Gullickson household maker style, we found this kind of sort of project idea, and we talked about it, and it had kind of been in our notebook of 10,000 ideas for 3-4 years probably. And then all of a sudden our local YMCA was going to have an 80s night. So we thought, we have to do this for the 80s night. It's perfect. We're going to, you know, get this done. And then my daughter and I decided to go on vacation to Arizona to visit my parents, and our vehicle broke, and all these different things were happening, and all of a sudden this timeline that we had got narrower and narrower and narrower and all of a sudden I get off the plane and I spend like 13 hours awake with lots of energy drinks getting the paint job done. So it's kind of a old idea that kind of got crammed into this nook of time that we wanted to get it done for, but I think that's really what pushes us to get a lot of these projects done is there's some place we want to share it. There's some, I think we feel, and jump in if I'm wrong, but I think we really feel like we're social makers and social good makers, and so unless it's going to benefit someone else, we rarely make something that's just for us.
Right.
Because then it's just going to sit around at our house and we don't need more stuff sitting around our house.
When you've literally got a backlog of over 1,000 projects, you need some way to decide what's on top. And so, when something like this comes up, it's like, oh, we've got this idea. We kind of think we know how we're going to execute it, and now it'll be useful to somebody outside the house. And so, so we dive into it. And in this case, because of the compressed timeline, we didn't have any choice but to pursue it in parallel. So we needed help. I would have loved to have done, the cabinetry on it, but it would have taken me 6 months. Whereas I took the sketch, I shot a picture of it with my phone, I emailed it down to my dad, who just happened to have retired.
Yeah,
and I'm like, hey,
perfect timing.
You're not working anymore, so here's a project. And then my dad he's a quality control guy. He works for Sub-Zero and some other company. He's very detail oriented. So from that sketch.
Oh my gosh, the sketches.
Literally,
they were so different. I'm like, here's a box and here's Pac-Man.
Yeah.
Make it work. And Jim's sketches had every 1/8 to 16th of an inch and the right size nuts and bolts, and I'm like,
and so I'm like, okay, you need to tell me the back of this piece so I know what I've got to work with on the electronics and the screen.
The back of this flat angle piece.
This part right here, this control panel. That was one of the parts of the design that I tried to keep simple because I knew that it was going to have to basically get cut, come back to my house, and then I would work on that while Dad and brother worked on the rest of the cabinet. And then when the girls were out of town, so my objective was everything has to be assembled in back of the house and ready for paint as soon as Jim steps off the airplane. So that was so luckily that worked. And then obviously there's other contingencies like getting parts and all of that. The electronics and things had to come from eBay and around the world, and so you never know. You kind of hope everything's going to work the way you want it to, but there were changes along the way.
And I got off the airplane, and then it was raining for 3 days, and we have a shack of a garage that I assume one day will burn down based on what we do. So I'm not putting a new one up. We'll put a new one up when this one's gone.
Right.
And so you can't work in it when it rains. You just, you can, but it's not pleasant.
Anyway.
And stuff wouldn't dry. And so what turned into quick paint job in the garage, started in the garage, started getting everything wet, hauling in a wet machine, and standing in my tiny living room that's smaller than this
really
space.
Funny picture of her peeking
on a step stool, trying to get this thing painted at 2 in the morning, and then I did want some design aspects, and I wanted sort of the 8-bit. We were still thinking of a name for it, with player 1 and player 2. I thought, okay, well, let's do donor 1. Because then we can make more iterations of this as we go. And so I'm trying to hurry up and paint while I was so busy painting the black box, I didn't think painting color on top of black is going to take 37 coats of red paint around it. And then when we had a framed screen, because it's cut out of plywood, that was kind of rough, and there was places where, kind of. I'm being kind. It was not good. I was worried people were going to cut themselves on it. So, here I am, 3 hours before the party, saying to the guy at Fleet Farm, you know what a pool noodle looks like? I need that, but much smaller. And so I kind of thought, okay, the big noodles that you float around in the pool, you cut a line in that and you can put it over something to cushion it. And so that's where the white framing came in. It's not real pretty, and it was almost impossible to get on because I had to heat it. I was heat gunning it and prying it open and then heating it so it would close again. It was a kerfuffle, but
I was blown away because I knew when I got this piece home and I did all these measurements and I thought I was so clever putting all the marks in the back. And then I took out the saber saw and laid into it, and I didn't really think about the fact that when you're using that kind of a saw, the ugly side is the bottom side,
Which
I
is the
had
front
made
side.
the front because I didn't want to get pencil marks on it. So instead of getting pencil marks, I just tore the daylights out of it. So I was like, I don't know what I'm gonna do to fix this, but Jamie figured something out.
Well, me and whoever was working at Fleet Farm that day, we were going up and down the plumbing and the, you know, all the different aisles, kind of looking for the right thing. And so this came home with me, and it's, I mean, it's still on now because it's working. So donor two will have a better plan.
What's kind of funny is when we, you know, again, throughout the entire project, we're like, we're gonna rush through this thing to get it done for this one event, and then if all it has to do is survive 6 hours, and then we'll get it at home, and you'll see later. Things could have been done a lot nicer, but we didn't think it would have to last very long, and so. You know, we got there and it made it through the night, and we're like, phew, you know, now you get back home to the lab and tear it apart and do it properly. And that night we had people asking like, oh, can I use it for this or that? And so it ended up leaving directly from the venue of the party to the YMCA and spent the time there, and it went straight from the YMCA to here. So honestly,
and it's going from here, coming home. It gets one night at home,
yeah.
one night of rest, and then it'll be at Milwaukee Maker Faire, and then we already kind of have a group of people asking about, what's next, and I don't know, flip a coin, like how do you decide who gets to keep it to play with? I keep saying eventually it's going to live in my living room, but I don't know that it'll ever end up there. So do you want to talk a little bit more about the guts, the electronics?
Yeah, maybe we'll pull it apart and take a look on the inside. Oh.
You're still connected back here.
Great, there we go. It's loose, and then have the face.
Got it?
Let's try the lightning. There we go. Okay. All right.
This part I don't know anything about.
So this is the part that's not as pretty as I would have liked to have been, but we were in a hurry. So there's a lot of different ways that you can build a arcade game emulator machine. And most people will go with something like a Raspberry Pi or something that runs a software emulation of the video game system, so you can use download games from the internet and play them. But there's like legal complexities with that. And so since we were going to use the machine for fundraising, we wanted to look for something that might be a little bit more legitimate. And so a friend of mine had built a machine using one of these boards that's commonly known as like a 60-in-1 or JAMA board. These things are available on eBay, and they come with a certain number of games built in, and presumably they've got the proper rights to be making and selling those. And so that's what we went with. The connector on the edge here is actually a industry standard connector that they started using back in the 80s in regular consoles so that they could switch the parts in and out easily. Back then, the board that would have plugged into there would have been much bigger, and it would have only had one game on it. But now these have anywhere up to 250 or more.
Like 600, the one I want next.
Yeah, so we settled on this one because it had the games. Again, the goal for the machine was this 80s party, so we wanted to get a card that had games that were appropriate, so Pac-Man and Miss Pac-Man and Frogger and all that. And, good price point. So there's this board. There's this connector, which...
Right, we should mention that. So how much was a board like this?
Yeah, I want to say this was like $40 or something.
Something like that. Yeah.
So,
I know you have a list of what the machine ended up costing.
Yeah, somewhere. So, right, this board was something we had to buy. The other thing we had to buy was the controls. You can see that we're looking at the back side.
You want to turn it around to show the controls? Or?
I think this is okay for here. So these are another thing that just you can buy a kit of this off of eBay or Amazon. These are just regular arcade controls. They use mechanical micro switches. This guy looks a little loose. And then this is the joystick, which again is the same switches just connected to a stick. These are wired into this disaster of a wiring harness that go back to the pins on this board. And the board provides all of the power and logic and things for that.
All right, this shows the rush, let's just tie this stuff together, label it quick with the label maker, and then we'll build speaker holes, and we'll make all the wires pretty, and
we had all these ambitions.
It's like your teenager that goes off and then you know, you finally get them home to shower because this is what they look like when they come back.
Yeah, this was expected to last one night, but it's clearly done longer, so I guess I can't complain too much. But right, so really this is the bulk of the magic is in this board. The display is just a standard VGA LCD flat screen monitor that I got from somebody scrapped as trade.
It's been okay tested.
It's been okay tested. I actually heard that this came out of another arcade machine at some point. But
oh, really?
Yeah, it's got a long history. I assumed this would burn up in like 4 hours after we started using it, but it's done so far so good. So, that actually leads to a good point. Is one of the things that I didn't really think about until we were cutting parts was exactly how we were going to mount the screen to the panel, which matters because the screen's kind of heavy, and when it's in the cabinet, it hangs, and so you got to do it in a way that deals with that. And so what I ended up coming up with was actually these corner pieces. These are 3D printed parts, and just something I whipped up in OpenSCAD. But what's cool is they're parametric. So if the screen decides to die, and all I have to do is find another 17-inch monitor, measure the kind of thickness of the edge on the screen, and I can punch that into the OpenSCAD model, and it'll regenerate these parts so that they'll fit, and then it can be mounted again. So yeah, so the screen uses a regular 5 and 12 volt power supply. You could use like an ATX style computer power supply. I use this brick thing because it's quiet and cheap.
Well, one of the fancy pieces we did was actually put the port on the back because that was just a gaping hole. Right. And we didn't know if it was going to stay a gaping hole or if it was going to...
That's one of the things when you're going to build something that other people are going to interact with, especially if you're not going to be there to supervise it. Yeah, the original running version of this, the power cord for both the board's power supply and for the screen were just coming up the back. And it was one of those things where, yeah, somebody tripped on it. Whenever you're dealing with, household current, it's really not a place to experiment. So that now terminates into a normal outlet receptacle. There's actually a fuse in it, which is always a good thing to have. And then that just goes up and powers the board and the display, so it can be switched on and off from the outside.
This is the guy that gave us trouble.
Yeah, the other piece in here is this change acceptor, which is something I'd never worked with before, and something that nobody who I talked to who had built one of these had ever dealt with, because who would want this in their house? And this is just another standard piece off of eBay. And basically you configure it by putting a coin in it that's of the type you want to accept. And then it's got some connections on the back, which go into this part of the wiring harness. And the board actually, because this is based off the same standards that a regular arcade machine would be, it already has signals for this. So the only hard part about making the machine take quarters was figuring out how to understand the wiring harness enough to get the connections made. But then that was basically it. So
and being the money raiser, I'm like, we gotta get it to take dollar bills, but apparently those parts cost more, and there's problems with it accepting bills, and they fail more, and then this one failed, which I had a laugh about.
I'm like, we don't want to do that because this part is $15, and the one that would accept bills was $75, and so.
Well, but we had this big box, and I thought, that box is so big, it needs dollar bills, not little tiny coins. So I think if we were to do something that took coins again, I would make this box much smaller so it looks like the donation is bigger.
Yeah.
But if we built one with that big of a box, then I would fight harder to get the dollar bill accepted.
It definitely was. That was one of the parts of the design that really went through a lot of changes, because the ones that we saw originally were humongous and had huge transparent bottoms. Mm-hmm. And so the thought there was like, well, we don't want to make the whole thing transparent because the cost of the window in here, the material for the window is actually one of the more expensive components. So we'll make it smaller. And then actually, my mom brought up the same thing. She's like, it's going to take $1 million in quarters to fill the bottom of this. So if you look, there's actually another board in here that goes at a 45-degree angle to try to reduce the size of that space. But even with that, it takes an enormous amount of money before it starts to even show up down here.
Well, and I think something that I didn't think of, and I didn't, hear you bring up either, was the ones at the airports are probably getting emptied like
once a year,
right? Because there's people. I mean, airports have security in them all the time, and there's people around, and we're like, we probably should put a lock on there because nonprofit people don't want their money stolen. And so that all of the sort of securing money and something being empty frequently never really came up until an afterthought, and now we think, okay, there's ways to actually make that fundraising component better by making the money look like there's more in it. So next time.
Yeah, no, there was a lot of ideas that came along. I mean, there were things that as we, from the original sketch through the different levels of building it, there were things that we thought of that we thought, this is something we should change now. And there were other ideas that we had that we thought, this would be better, but we just don't have time. And then, of course, once it was out in the field and we couldn't work on it anymore, we came up with all sorts of other ideas. But since we couldn't implement them with Donor 1, we started working on it.
Yep, started working on Donor 2. And so my favorite video games ever are the table games that you would play, like you go to our Pizza Hut had when I was growing up. And so you'd sit in the booth and your friend would sit across from you, you'd play Mrs. Pac-Man and the screen would flop. And those were my favorite. And so I really wanted a table arcade for our living room. So I had been looking around for a table that I thought was appropriate. I didn't want a big sort of bulky table like a lot of those arcade machines are, because I wanted to be able to move it around, we wanted to be able to take it, we wanted to reduce the bulk.
Something we learned from this was, portability is important.
I want to fit in the new vehicle, and hopefully that transmission lasts another 10 years. And so I saw on our St. Vincent's website, St. Vincent de Paul had they were like the 70s octagon-shaped table, and then the cupboards open in it. And so I thought, well, that's perfect. It's already got an opening. It's got a cool shape that has many sides that you could put controllers on. And then I went over there, and it was already sold. So I kind of sat around and waited, and we happened to go to our Habitat Community Restore in Beaver Dam, and they happened to be having a furniture sale, and I love getting deals. And they had some other coupon thing going on, and so I found one of these tables, and I got it for $2. And so I brought it home, and you were gone that day, and I'm texting them pictures, and I said, I found Donor 2, I found the little sister, here she is. And it's this adorable little table, and so we're gonna cut a screen in the top, a screen hole in the top of that. You already picked up a monitor for it. We've been looking at the boards because this one was all about on the cheap, and I really want to play X-Men. So the new board has 1 in 600 games or something. That's what I want to put on it.
You couldn't. That's the only downside of this approach. You can't pick and choose what games you want. So this one has 60. You had to go all the way up to 400 to get the one game.
Yeah. So I said, well, if we're going to 400, let's just go. It's $30 difference. Let's just do it. Otherwise, there's going to be Donor 3, and then there's more money and more work. And so we've been looking at trackballs, because there's a lot of games on it that you can play. So trackballs to put on. We looked at cutting some boxes to put on the ends of the table, because once you get the screen in, there's not a lot of surface area. So we think we're going to have to build out the control panels and then wire them in through the sides. There's more you want to say about that?
No, I think, it was really kind of cool, because I think that going into this project, it seemed like the electronics and that kind of stuff would be the challenge. And it turned out that was actually the easiest part. The biggest challenge of finishing this was the cabinetry. Mm-hmm. And so...
For us.
Well, true. But I mean, I don't know. It's a big...
Everybody has different skills.
Fair enough.
For us, that was the hardest part.
It's definitely the physically largest part of the project.
Yeah.
But what's so cool about that table design is that the cabinetry is 80% done. So really we need to do, we need to cut over a screen, and we need to build some kind of boxes on the side that hold the controls, which actually we were just talking about maybe laser cutting that.
We saw the laser
saw
cutter
the laser.
here. Great way to use your idea studio.
Right. It's something I wouldn't be able to do at home, but we have here. All right, so that takes what we learned from this, and we eliminate the problems that were hard for us. that means that the next iteration will not only be more suitable, but it'll also be easier to produce.
And increases the portability. You know, I don't mind letting people use Donor One to raise money for all sorts of good things, but I really hate trying to get it anywhere. And so that was kind of the deal getting it here. It was like, if you guys can get it here, it's all yours. And now we have a trailer, so we can transport it, but it's still a pain. You know, it's still like, oh, I gotta strap it down and carry it out, and blah. The other one is, you know, a 2-person lift just because it's kind of hard to get your arms around. It's not heavy. So that fits through our front door easily, whereas this one has to.
It could fit in the back of a sedan with the seats down.
Right. Right.
The other thing that's cool is it's recycling stuff, right? Like,
right.
You know, there wasn't a lot of, you know, there wasn't a lot of materials that went into this, but, you know, a couple sheets of plywood that could have been used for something else. Whereas with Donor 2, it's a table that would have otherwise been scrapped. So
yeah, and it's you got the screen from Swap,
the display came from UW Swap, so that's recycled. Yeah, mm-hmm. It's that's cool. You know, like if you can make stuff that uses stuff that exists, and aside from saving money and time, it's less wasteful. But yeah. So that'll be a fun one to build. I think all in, I was keeping track of what this cost, and I want to say that it was probably around $200.
That's what I think too.
You know, if you were to build one with nothing but new materials, you'd probably pay a little bit more because the screen I had in stock.
Speaker looks like it's from
the speaker's from the parts bin, but it's not long for this. It'll be replaced.
Yeah, that was something that we didn't get done on this one. And honestly, after we built it, we didn't know if we needed. We were going to cut speaker holes and mount speakers. And frankly, it's plenty loud with it closed in there. You open it up.
It might be better to have this than hanging on a zip tie, but
right.
You know,
right.
Maybe mounting it a little bit more.
But right, like you'd have to get speakers.
It'd make it more durable, that's for sure. Because one thing is it is delicate. Like if it's transported roughly, it can act up. So. And
I'm more worried about having sound for X-Men than I am for man.
But have stereo. But yeah.
Anything?
I don't think. Is there anything that we haven't covered, or any questions that you thought of while we were talking?
Like aside from the portability issue, or is there anything like in general that you think is an improvement with Donor 2?
I'll tell you one huge one with that is that it's a lot more serviceable. We kind of lucked out with this one in that this design happened to let you open this and work on it. But it's still
that was luck. That wasn't designed.
And it's still not ideal. One of the things with this board is that there's switches on here that let you switch it between regular and maintenance mode, and that lets you configure the games and that kind of stuff. So right now, in order to just put the thing in maintenance mode, you have to take screws out and pull it apart, which is a hassle. So with 2, we can just I'll open the doors and reach in there and work on it, which will be that'll be a big improvement.
Yeah, and I think the money collection area, you know, it's something that I hope to improve too. To make that smaller for Mystic with quarters, or I don't know, maybe build a lower base on it or something that takes dollars, or I don't know, but I wouldn't do that again.
Well, something else that we've thought about would be really fun is if we did more for the machine to automate the process of like tallying the collections, right? So, you know, one of the things that we originally talked about was putting like an LED display up here that would show like how much money had been collected.
And we talked about putting it on here too, but once it was designed and we had this guy in, we realized we didn't have any room.
Right. Or else, also, you know, one of the things we've noodled on is actually having. It's really easy to embed, you know, like a little computer with Wi-Fi in one of these things, and it could be like, you know, posting those tablets on the web, right? So you could have a website that's like, here's all the different charities, and here's how much it's collected for each.
Right. Because right now we're asking the charities to keep track, kind of, and just kind of give us an estimate. So for the Y, the time that it was there, the night of the party, it made about $100. And so, you know, that's just kind of a best estimate. But to us, to me, I should say, that's the exciting part, I think, for you too, is to see what this does for other nonprofits. Because if we can spend $200 and over the course of 10 years, this raises $2,000, that's a huge win for a community, you know?
Yeah, so stuff like that, you know, we've got a few other ideas, I think, but the big things, that improve with Donor 2 are affordability and serviceability.
Anything else?
What do you feel like, I know you said that you are more art-oriented and you're more tech, what do you feel like previous projects that you've done that helped you with what you needed to do?
Sure. The little library, I think, was a huge part of that because we had to put plexiglass or whatever you guys used in here. And, you know, we had to decide on paint durability, we had to decide on spatial use and kind of accessibility so that kids would be able to get in it, you know, so when we were designing and keeping the rain out. And so I think sort of having to build a space that served a lot of functions was really good, at least for me design-wise, for getting this ready.
Yeah, I think that's a good example because a lot of the stuff that I build doesn't get much further than the workbench. So, you know, things like making it safe and making it sturdy and making it withstand weather and that kind of stuff I don't usually bother with. So it's like
it's usually me going, we don't want the kids to get electrocuted.
Right. Also, it doesn't have to look like anything other than like this. Like this to me, this is good.
This is fine.
This works fine.
This is how it would look.
But if this was built in a way where you could see that part, then that would not be cool. So.
Well, and I think a lot of the 3D printing work you did early on, all the years that you had the printer, made these go really fast. Like I was really surprised that all of a sudden the monitor was mounted. Because to me that's a huge challenge. We talked about strapping it, we talked about whatever, and he said, well, I think I can just 3D print those, let's see what we can do. So I think kind of your experience and time spent with those programs and with test printing probably sped this up.
Right, just the fact that it occurred to use it was a function of having worked with it so much. And that was a really good example of a problem that ended up, it sounds really simple, but it ended up being really hard because, you know, when you think about it, it's like it's a hole and you stick something behind it. But all of the techniques that I would normally rely on couldn't be used. Like the biggest thing that I wanted to do was use some kind of a strap and mount it through the face of this board because this is only a half-inch thick. So there's not a lot of, you know, without going through it, you can't get a lot of strength. But piercing the face of this was not an option. So I
said no to that.
I was really stuck. And I didn't want to do something permanent because I knew that the monitor won't live. I know it will die. So
yeah, we had to make something.
It had to be something to be
serviceable.
replaced and something that didn't require this exact same monitor to work. So, so yeah, that was. That's a good point, though. That definitely helped make that happen. Whereas if I hadn't done something before, I would have been really stuck.
And I just think us working together on projects over the course of 15 years have really made this project go smooth. I think there was times where had we worked together less, somebody probably would have bit somebody's head off.
And also, when you get stuck, right? Like, so like one of us would run out of ideas, and then the other one could chime in and be like, well, what have you thought about this, or what about this? Or, you know, and so that kind of thing. Like that, like fixing that hole, I was just out. Like I didn't like, every idea I have for making this hole look less gross is really complicated and basically, I was honestly, I was at a point where I'm just like, forget it, scrap the whole panel, we're gonna cut it out of acrylic, I'm done with it, and it's like, that's great, except that we've got, you know, a day.
Yeah.
And no means to cut the acrylic and it would double the cost of the project, so it was not an option.
And I think having kind of a budget in mind helped the project too, which seems counterintuitive, but I think it made us make design choices that make it more replicable for people.
Right.
And I know $200 isn't a price point for everybody, but it's a lot more accessible than some of the other projects. And there's actually going to be a kid at Milwaukee Maker Faire. I'm super excited. He made it's an IKEA table and it's a game, and he says you can make it for like $12 or $17 or something. And I thought, I need to meet this kid because he knows how to do this better than I do.
Well, it's that square IKEA table that everyone has seen, you know.
Right, that everyone has sitting around somewhere. We got 3 of them sitting in the basement.
Yep.
Like,
no, and that's cool. And that was a big part of the design was that we wanted to build something that someone else had a chance at building because, it may have been easier to just have used parts that we happen to have or whatever else.
or buy an old cabinet.
Right. But yeah, we definitely want to build something, and we still haven't gotten around to it. But one of the outputs of the project is we actually want to be able to put together a concise set of plans so that if somebody can, if somebody wants to repeat it, they don't have to relearn all this stuff and do all the rediscovery. I'm still just working on distilling that stack of just drawings my dad made down to something that's like a sheet or two.
That's accessible to everybody
Right.
that aren't quality control people.
It's pretty amazing. Plus, it was just fun to work with
Yeah.
everybody involved, and it was really a team effort. And, and I think it amplified, used the best of everybody's skills.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess that's it.
Yeah, I can't think of anything else unless you guys have some other questions. Cool.
All right.
Thank you
Put this
so
back
much.
together. I'm There you go. Ooh, that little one's cute. Do those planes just get faster?
Yeah, well, what happens is each time you play a board, you go through time, right? So we're like in kind of, I forget what year it is, but World War One.
Planes get more agile.
And so you get faster planes, and then there's helicopters, and then eventually you end up with spaceships like you,
Oh, thanks.
which are way more